A cybercrime report shows that Singapore received 32 million fraud attacks last year. Now, according to data analytics firm LexisNexis, this was driven by a surge in digital transactions post-pandemic, which also opened up more opportunities for cyber criminals to exploit loopholes. And most of these attacks were carried out by automated bots, which target e-commerce payment transactions. Bot attacks here in Singapore jumped 146%. And that is more than 5 times the global average. One cybersecurity expert says that these bots use stolen personal data, so the most important thing to do is change those passwords frequently.
Next is also a lot of the attacks or a lot of the data breaches also contains the user email addresses. So one of the things to do as well is segregate your emails, okay, for those that you use for banking and those critical functions to those you use online for social media and so on and so forth. So that in the event your emails are stolen, right, at least those cannot access into your critical functions.
Attacks targeting digital identity data nearly doubled compared to 2021. Fraudsters rode on the wave of streaming services to create new fake accounts and take over existing ones. The report says that international fraud rings are heavily linked to attacks on organizations based here in Singapore as cyber criminals tap on the open economy and status as a financial hub. Professor Wong adds that while Singapore has strong anti-fraud measures, more could still be done.
Because if you look at the theft that's happening or some of this fraud, they use stolen credentials such as passwords. So I think we also need to move towards a passwordless system where instead of memorizing passwords, use other form of authentication, for example, biometrics, digital tokens, so on and so forth.
To tell us more, we have with us in studio Dr. Stephen Topless, Vice President Global Fraud and Identity at data analytics firm LexisNexis Risk Solutions. And also with us in the studio tonight is Ryan Flores. He's Senior Manager APAC Threat Research at cybersecurity firm Trend Micro. Welcome to both of you. I'll start with you, Dr. Topless. Now, your firm is behind this report. We just heard Dawn mention the reasons for Singapore being a preferred target for attacks like these, the open economy, its status as a financial hub. Are there any other reasons why Singapore, relative to other countries in the Asia-Pacific, is a preferred target for attacks like these?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think fraudsters are out there to make money. And so they look at the relatively affluent population in Singapore, and so it's a natural target above other countries in the region. Definitely that open, connected financial hub is key to getting their money out, potentially in an easy way. And then the last point I would say is historically, before the pandemic, digital fraud was relatively low in Singapore. So there's also that question of, you know, were there less defences in place because we weren't expecting to be attacked in such a way? So fraudsters were really testing Singapore as well.
So there's been a trigger or triggers of some sort to all of this. Mr. Flores, let's bring you in on the conversation now. This trend of seeing the number of attacks that we're seeing, is that something you've observed as well? And why is this so?
Yes, definitely. Because as Stephen has said, right, Singapore is a global financial hub. The technology adoption here and e-commerce adoption has been phenomenal and has grown in the past few years. So a lot of digital services have come up here, set up business here, and is even using Singapore as their launch point. So these actually goes into play and the attack surface on making it attractive for cyber criminals to poke into this and see what they can get.
All right, attacks like these, back to you, Dr. Topless, they can be human-initiated or they can be bots. Now, Dawn mentioned as well, Singapore not just a preferred target, but also as far as bot attacks go, more than 5 times the global average. Given the nature of bot attacks and the types of targets that they tend to go for and our remedies for them, is it more or less concerning that bot attacks are so much of a threat to Singapore?
I think it's reflective of what we saw last year in Singapore, that significant rise in scams of all sorts and the variety of attempts of phishing that were really aimed at getting our login details to access our accounts. And when you have that data, the first thing you do as a cyber criminal is use bots to test if that data is still valid before that then gets used in a human-initiated attack. So I think that high volume just reflects how much we were all being targeted by phishing sites.
Just very quickly, so you use bot attacks to tell you whether it's worth your going in with a human-initiated attack?
Correct. That's one of the reasons to do that, exactly.
Right. How sophisticated are these bot attacks, though?
Actually, the bot attacks themselves are not that sophisticated. It's just part of the scam, which is becoming more and more complex by having these different stages.
Right. So it isn't necessarily dependent on the technology. It's not new.
No.
So,
correct. But it's growing and it's taking advantage of the sophistication of the attack. So being able to generate these phishing sites, making them local in nature as well, means that there's more data to go and test with these bots.
Mr. Flores, you're going to say something.
Yeah, so one of the key factors why these kind of attacks are increasing is, number one, there's a lot of data leaks that has happened in the past few years. What happens in a data leak is the cyber criminals would have more data, more credentials, to try and access social network accounts, banking accounts, apps, and they make use of these stolen credentials and data leaks with automated tools to test. And once they're successful, they can have a human in place, and then that human cyber criminal can do the transfer, can do the scams and social engineering attacks.
Oh, we heard from that analyst in that quick report before we crossed to you. He was saying, change your passwords. I suppose in terms of regulations, we could have more fraud-targeted type regulation. But realistically, what can an organization do? What can an individual do to guard against attacks like that?
Yeah. So for me, I actually think the Singapore government is doing a lot of good things to combat scams. So you see all of these scam awareness campaigns that you find in the MRTs, in the buses, even in the ATMs before you withdraw money or you do a transaction, right? And that helps. Also, I know for certain that the Singapore police force is working with the banks and financial institutions to profile events that would lead to fraud, and they would try to stop the fraud from happening, or at least mitigate once a few thousand has been transferred to the scammer. The bank can stop the transaction, notify the user, and say, "Hey, are you really transferring this amount of money to this person abroad?"
Right. So to give the consumer a heads up, as it were, as to whether to really sort of authorize that transaction, it would be good. But in the event that doesn't happen, I mean, Dr. Topless, when it comes to these attacks, are we seeing any specific types of attack patterns? What can we learn from those if we are seeing a pattern? And would that give an individual, not necessarily the institution, but the end user, a heads up as to what to look out for?
So these scams are continually evolving, and that's what makes it difficult for the organizations. I think on the organization side, being able to collaborate in real time is key. As an individual, I think we actually just need to take a step back and just accept that we are likely to get scammed at some stage. It doesn't matter who we are, how sophisticated they are. I personally know people in the fraud prevention space who have been scammed. So from that point of view, as and when that happens to us, we shouldn't be kind of embarrassed or worried about it, but we need to go and report it as quickly as possible to the police, to the financial institutions, because that will help us understand how the scams evolve and how to solve them as quick as possible.
Well, we thank you very much for coming to the studios, talk about this very important issue. Dr. Stephen Topless there from LexisNexis Risk Solutions, and Ryan Flores from Trend Micro.